Live from the Metal Mayhem Studios in Rochester, New York.
We are gold. We are gold.
And heard around the world by metalheads just like you. This is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Heavy metal music.
Your weekly dose of metal music, interviews, album reviews, news, and more. Want to be part of the show? Send us a message through our website, metalmayhemroc.com, or hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. Search Metal Mayhem ROC.
It's getting nice and heavy.
And now, welcome to tonight's host, John the Vernomatic Verno.
Well, good evening, everybody, and happy Valentine's Day to all you lovers out there. The Vernomatic here, along with Metal Walt and Ian O'Rourke from the band Motorlord. Hey, guys, how are you?
What's going on there, Verno? What's going on there, Metal Walt?
Hey, guys, what's up? I like the new backdrops. They're looking cool.
That's some good work. You know, props to the Metal Mayhem ROC art team. So tonight we're celebrating Valentine's Day with a dear subject to all our hearts, the history of metal. Walt, what do we got? What year are we doing tonight?
We're doing 85. We're at the midpoint of the 80s. Yep, we've covered a lot of stuff already. 85 is another one of them years, and yeah, and then we have the Live Aid factor. So lots to talk about today.
The mid 80s, you know, like in pre-production. Ian and I were talking about what came around in the mid 80s. A lot of fluorescent floral shirts, you know,
tiger stripes.
You know, Paul Stanley's wearing pink gloves.
Oh yeah, body glove and just
a lot of crap. So what we're gonna do tonight, because the 80s are in full force, there's just a lot of bands, a lot of music. So we're calling an audible, and what we decided to do was just make a list of everything we're familiar with and really what we want to share. We're not going to be here all night, but we are going to interject our opinions, our emotions, and our takes on some of these bands. So right off the bat, I'm going to get things started with possibly, you know, let's call them the old guard and the bands that have been around a while. You know, we got AC/DC releasing Fly on the Wall. 1985, they're, could say, going through the motions, not really much there. You know, that album, Fly on the Wall, I think it starts with that cartoon cover, got a little, you know, goofy, if you will. Mutt Lange isn't producing. Malcolm and Angus are still trying to do that. It had a couple songs, Sink the Pink, I think the title track, Fly on the Wall, and a couple other ones really wasn't that memorable. Aerosmith doing Done with Mirrors. Again, this is the spinning of the wheel period before they got into the later 80s with the pumps and Get a Grip and all that. And Ian, right off the bat, you said you had a problem with the Aerosmiths later on. What was your beef with Aerosmith in the late 80s?
Well, the biggest thing that really annoyed me with Aerosmith was the introduction to outside writers and ghost writers. They kind of stepped away from being the blues-based hard rock band with that kind of streety, you know, they shared that kinship with the New York Dolls early on, with some of that, you know, Rolling Stones mimic, and they lost that. They lost it huge, and they didn't try to retain any of it. And even with the stuff that they were doing, it was a little bit more rockin'. It just kind of came off as, this is us trying to do somebody else's music, and I didn't really care for it much.
Well, it's about 30 seconds longer than Done with Mirrors really deserved to be talked about, but you're right. They you know, they lost their, they got neutered, if you will. Yeah. Let's see, you know, that's really about it. We're going to concentrate on the big guns. So I'm going to send it over to Walt and have him start off. Any ideas about 85? What was your, what were your go-to releases in 85?
Well, since we started talking a couple of minutes ago about the clothing of 85 and all the Miami Vices and all that crap that was on TV, right? But we loved it all, right? We lived it and we loved it, right? So let's just get on.
I don't know if I loved it. I lived it.
Well, we loved it at that period. So
yeah.
We didn't know any better.
On that topic, Kiss releases Asylum, right? And come on, guys, what can be more absurd than the artwork and the cover of Asylum? I mean, that thing was really pathetic. It looked like freaking transvestites with purple and blue and pink lipstick on. It was like caricatures of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just really, really bad. However, the album, I mean, okay, it is what it is, right? I feel like most of those 80s albums, the one prior, and then, Crazy Nights, I feel like they all had a couple good tracks on there, but nothing really long lasting. But, this album, I don't know, it was good to me, at least there was 3 or 4 songs that were good to me. I mean, who didn't like Tears Are Falling? I think it had some good guitar work, and the video was cool. Paul Stanley kind of doing the whole, windshield wiper thing at the end, and, Who Wants to Be Lonely and All Night. I mean, they were pretty cool tracks, but, in general, it fell flat. It was just kind of like one of them albums. It had 2 or 3 decent tracks, and then it kind of went nowhere. And they would just stay in this formula for a while. But again, like I said last episode, everybody loved Kiss in the 80s. They were back. They were a new version of the band, and, they were cool again, doing arenas and that stuff. So it was hard to really argue that this was a flop by any means,
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I like that earlier period, Creatures of the Night, Lick It Up.
Oh, yeah.
And Animalize. I thought those 3 albums had some balls to them. Mark St. John on Animalize was a fantastic guitarist. Those songs still had balls, but like when you talk about Asylum, all right, Up All Night, that's a terrible song. Tears Are Falling.
I disagree with you. I'm like, I don't think Animalize was anything special. I think it's kind of all cut from the same cookie cutter mold. All 3 albums, in fact. I think that and Crazy Nights all cut from the same mold. 2 or 3 good tracks in the album, filler.
I forgot about Crazy Nights. Maybe that's the one I'm thinking about. That one was terrible.
Crazy Nights was god awful. We'll just skip over that when we get to it.
All right. Well, all right. Enough of Asylum. That wasn't really happening. Well, let's go over to and this is going to take even less time. Bon Jovi. Never a fan. I give him props for how he started, writing that killer song Runaway in the middle of the night as he was cleaning the studios, have a 17-year-old, but never a big fan of the band. Ian, give us a little background on this. And remember, not a lot.
No, my girlfriends, I had 2 girls that I dated in high school. Both of them loved Bon Jovi. So I heard a lot of it. I mean, In and Out of Love, I mean, is it the worst written song ever? No. There were a couple of, songs that they had off the album that were, kind of floating around at the time. I really had I didn't have any big love for Bon Jovi. I didn't, there wasn't enough oomph for me, especially coming from Van Halen. Sorry. I just not enough.
I agree. I couldn't second your opinions. I think, being a Jersey guy, they were all the rage. I mean, and this, just when you hear the album title, 7,800 Degrees Fahrenheit, you think back, oh my God, that was Bon Jovi, the beginning of their heyday. And then you go look at the album and you're like, well, there was no hit song really. Yeah, In and Out of Love, Tokyo Road was okay. But the rest of it, it was just them kind of growing up the ladder. That was really it, and getting a name for themselves.
What was it? The
product wasn't great.
No, the product wasn't great. But was it the hair? Was it the look? Was it the JBJ smile? It was that had to be it.
Yeah, I think that the mayhem that ensued from them was all, and it, you liken it to something like Donny Osmond or Leif Garrett back in the 70s. These guys were out there, they looked good, they're cute, the girls were going crazy. It just didn't, there wasn't enough, I think, at least from a guy perspective, there wasn't enough integrity in the music. It was all about writing a pop song, which is not always a bad thing.
No, it made him a rich man and toured the world, and but it
and
automatically,
it's the story. In Jersey, they were the story, right? Because again, we're in the biggest metropolitan area in the country, right? They're kicking on the heels. He's friends with Springsteen, same neck of the woods, right? They grew up in the clubs, and they're the hard work, middle class guys that work at the factories, and everybody loved them because they rooted them on for that. They were basically just copying the script of Bon Jovi, no offense, and that was part of it.
Well, all right, JBJ to the bench. Ian, your turn. What's on your list? What do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about a band that probably is near and dear to all of us, would be Dokken. Okay, Under Lock and Key was probably one of my, I mean, to this day, I still listen to it. Probably one of my all-time favorite albums at the time. Being a guitar guy, being into all of the peers that were around with Eddie Van Halen or through that scene and the guys that everyone talked about, I went apeshit for this album and I loved it from top to bottom. There was not, you know, yeah, you got to deal with the ballads. They were all putting them out at the time. They were trying to show the other side of their creativity, but I thought that these guys were just the shit, and they were one of the bands that were on the top of my list. And this album, I can remember, I think I almost wore the tape out because I would play it so much back in the day.
Walt, your take on Dokken?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree in hindsight. I think in 85, I was, if I can be honest, I was still cutting my teeth more in the Police and the Eric Claptons and the Springsteens. And I don't think I appreciated an album such as this till later on. But when I look back at it, yeah, I mean, there's great songs in it. And I will tell you, I agree with you. And check this out, guys. You see this? Can you see this? What I'm holding up?
Nah, it's getting
No, it's
superimposed.
disappearing in your thing.
Yeah.
That's the magic of green screen.
This is, well, I'll tell you what it is. It's a pencil holder made it out of 4 cassettes. And it's a little box. And one of the 4 cassettes is the exact album you were talking about.
Nice.
My take on Dokken, I was a little more neutral on them. I happened to just see them because they're opening for bands. Not really. I honestly think they're nothing more than a B-list band. I never really thought anything more than of them. George Lynch, sure, George Lynch is George Lynch, but I never really got onto Dokken bandwagon. I'm not totally dissing them. I just never really got into them. I think they were that, you know, we talked about it, the rat type bands. They were lumped in with the hair bands, but they were really not hair bands. They just had the image of the hair band. Well,
and it was almost like cool to like them. Like it was not cool to like Bon Jovi. It was not cool to like Slaughter.
Fuck Bon Jovi.
But it was cool. But it was cool to like Dokken. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I liked Rat more than Dokken.
I did too, but you know, like if you had to say, okay, let's get at it, right? Winger, I thought was gay, but they're a good band. They're great musicians, but you don't realize it when you're a punk kid.
Yeah,
you're just if you're goofing on them.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I can't like Winger, I can't like Bon Jovi, I can't like Slaughter, but I can like Dokken and Rat.
I made a comment when I was having pre-show discussion with Verno regarding you know, the LA scene back in the day, and it was, by this point, it had gotten very astute. It was, you were either on this side, which was the glamier side, or you were on this side and you were the heavier side. But some of the heavier guys still had to kind of keep, or they still kind of kept with some of that California image. And Dokken was one of those bands. When they did that, Rat was another one. You know, they never got fully glam. They were a little more sleazy kind of looking. Yeah. But they kind of still, you know, they towed that line, probably because they had all the chicks going to the shows. I mean, you know, that's back in the 80s. Everybody did it for the chicks. I'm sorry. They did it for the chicks and the drugs. That's it.
Yep. And, you know, Ian, you're a musician. Ian's our guest. He's from the band Motorlord, but you know, that's your craft. That's your art. So they're out there. They're just doing it. It's who's someone to say that band sucks if you're a musician. So let's see. Let's stay on course as long as we're on Sunset Strip and Motley Crue. Okay. 1985 Motley Crue. Like we started this episode, fucking pink outfits, the Crew on Theater of Pain. I liked what you said last night, Theater of Pain. Yes, that's Theater of Pain. You know, they're coming off a Shout at the Devil and Theater of Pain. The music was forgettable. They've gone on record to say they really didn't even like it. Smoking in the boys' room, they had to have a hit with that, and they looked terrible. Even though they were trying to mock Aerosmith from 10 years earlier with the, the Rock's era outfits with the long stripes. We got about another 30 seconds with Motley Crue.
They sold out. I remember 85. It was like, they're sellout. They're sellouts. You know what? Look what they did on their prior albums, The Image. Now they're sellouts. A cover of a 60s tune and a ballad.
Right.
But it was one hell of a ballad, though.
True.
But here's the thing.
If you liked them, you dropped them. If you were a dude that loved the rockin' version of them, you were done with them.
Yeah, you're right.
You go back and you look at the history, though. This was, after the whole debacle with Vince Neil, Nikki Sixx and those guys were so rampantly messed up on drugs. They couldn't put two notes together if they wanted to save their lives. They were lucky that they were able to scab together that little piano riff and turn it into a song. But the rest of the material is forgetful. It's very forgetful. And, poo-poo on Nikki Sixx for ruining the look that Pete Way from UFO had brought in with the striped pants that Steve Harris stole later on. Nikki Sixx did it, threw a freaking tux coat on top of it.
That's what I was talking about.
Made it look stupid. Before that, it looked great.
I'm not going to defend Crew, but as bad as they got off course on Theater of Pain, they got back on the road. Every album, they had a different image. The next one was the next one, Dr. Feelgood, or
no, next one was Girls, Girls, Girls. Now
Girls. Now they're bikers. They're bikers.
Return to form.
And the music was a little better. But looking back, this is my opinion on the Crew. They didn't age well, and they really weren't that good.
They were really more spectacle.
And
it was
Vince
more spectacle.
Neil can't sing. He never could sing.
Right.
Yeah, but now
let's be honest, right?
No.
All right,
he couldn't.
That's enough of that. Rat, Invasion of Your Privacy. Touched on Rat a little earlier. I like Rat. I love Warren DeMartini. Stephen Pearcy, it is what it is. But Ian, what do you think of Rat? You're a guitarist.
Yeah. So Warren's another one of those guys, one of those great guitar icons. I worshiped at his feet as well. The first time I heard the riff for Lay It Down, I was completely enamored. I mean, it's probably one of the best guitar riffs that's ever been written. It just freaking slams right from the beginning. And he does the same thing with You're in Love. It's got that same drop D, just that and it just slams you right in the face. The only knock that I ever had with Rat on those albums was a lot of their songs stayed at this kind of consistency with the tempo.
Yeah.
Unless it was a ballad or something more balladish. They didn't do
Which
a
they
lot
didn't do much of.
Yeah, well, like Dokken, Dokken would do, stuff like Tooth and Nail or Paris is Burning, where it was, that up tempo kind of gets your blood pumping. Rat didn't really do a whole lot of that. They did a little bit, but not too much. But I totally love them.
I agree too, and I think, again, I like to talk about the imagery, right? The album cover. It's what they wanted to get across in all their albums from the beginning, right? You got the Playboy model on the chair, pulling up her stockings, and let's be honest. Come on, guys, that was strip club music, right? Yeah. You went to a strip club in the mid to late '80s. In my strip club days, on Friday night happy hours, grabbing beers with the boys after work, you heard Rat. You heard one of their 10 hits every time.
Yep.
They were just cool. They didn't write ballads. They were cool. They were a man's band. You're talking about sexy women drinking beers, and that's it.
Sure.
Oh, I totally agree. Rat, they had their run, but they died. Let's see what else we got on here. Sunset Strip done. That's about it for that.
How about Diamond Dave? We're going to talk about Diamond Dave.
Yeah, Roth, the EP.
Well, we can touch on it.
You know what?
Listen,
we could go all day. The actual EP, I don't mind it because it personifies what I love about Roth. It's just, I'm just a gigolo and everywhere I go. And then talk about imagery, the image of the videos, and it was 85. Hey, Dave never apologized for being Dave.
Because you didn't know what he was going to do. Nobody knew what he was doing in 85, right? Yeah, he left Van Halen unceremoniously. I'm not quite sure remembering when Sammy was announced as the new singer, but
Live
Dave
Aid,
did his thing.
Farm Aid,
Farm Aid. Yeah.
September
Farm Aid, right?
85.
But Dave comes in, he does this. Everybody's like, what the hell? But then you know his backstory, and you realize this was in his wheelhouse anyway. And then he takes the image forward off of like the Hot for Teacher video, and he puts these crazy videos out. And then you think about Eat 'em and Smile to Come. And then he drags out all these old standard songs on the tour in 86. And they became really big pieces of those shows, if you guys saw that. So he knew what he was doing.
Yeah. And this is all, I mean, Verno and I agree on this. I know, Lance, you do as well. Roth has his shtick that he has picked up from multiple influences. And all he did was express this portion of his shtick with this EP. And he pulled it off. You know, he didn't, it wasn't, he unapologetically, just like you said, he didn't, you know, say sorry or, you know, no, this is me. This is what I do. And he nailed it with those songs that came out. I mean, Christ, I think he charted with California Girls.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know, it wasn't a bad tune. I mean,
no. Well, I mean, the Beach Boys, come on.
yeah, I know.
They know how to write some songs.
But Dave brought the cool to it.
Yeah, I'm checking out. You know, I'm a Van Halen nuts swinger, so he could whatever. But 85, Dave was still, you know, he was still Dave. Let's see. What else? What do you got? Well, what's on your list? What do you want to talk about?
Let's change gears a little bit, right?
Let's go live albums.
All right.
We have 2.5 on here. We'll start with the first one. We'll touch on Iron Maiden, Live After Death. The double live coming from the Power Slave, Maiden at their absolute pinnacle. This was in fine Maiden fashion. Everything's over the top. World Slavery Tour, you know, couple hundred shows, and then 4 nights at Long Beach Arena at the end. Double live album. I think it's great. I fucking love, you know, we all grew up on Live After Death. It's, again, them at their pinnacle. You know, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, Children of the Damned, Power Slave, 2 Minutes to Midnight. It's a, you know, a rundown sheet of their greatest hits. Ian, what's your take on it? I know you you're itching over there to talk about them.
Well, I mean, because I've gone on record before, Power Slave from Maiden, that's my favorite Maiden album. Mm-hmm. They played a lot of the great stuff from that album. Plus, you know, I mean, a lot of their other great material. But, I mean, there's nothing like Maiden live. You know, you hear them in the studio and they've got the magic, but you can shine a turd a little bit, you know, with any kind of band in the studio if you got the right, you know, engineer and producer. Hearing them in a live context, that's the cool part about it. And that energy that they bring at that time. That's why I think Walt had mentioned it before, going forward, you know, when you kind of step out of the 70s from, you know, the Kisses and some of the albums we've seen, going now to these guys. I mean, this is a have to have live album. If you're somebody that's into live albums, you got to have it.
And plus the video, it's like you have a video tutorial to go along with it. And they did it cool. They had a little different media on the, back then, the VHS. So, you know, Maiden's always over provided, you know, they've always gone that extra route. I never ever have a problem with bands that capture tours and release live albums. People have always bitched, another live album. It's like Maiden throughout their career, they go on a tour, they do a live album, you know.
But back then these were gems back then. They weren't done like Rush put one out every other tour, a DVD, right? These were special. Live After Death was special. Yeah. And I mean, come on, it's the now even, you know, Stream from Long Beach, that's like synonymous with that recording. I mean, I've seen Maiden. I saw Maiden on the, I can't remember what tour, the 2000 tour, and up in Scranton, PA, and he just decided for the night he was going to call Scranton, PA, Long Beach. I have the bootleg. And it was just funny. He was in a jovial mood, and he was playing around with Tonight We're in Long Beach. That's how much of an image that album made.
Right.
Another Another live album from the same period, Scorpions, Worldwide Live. Now, remember Worldwide Live, Ian?
Oh, yes.
Well,
I can remember.
well, you were looking at me like I had 16 eyes.
Well, no. The thing I remember the most about it was when they were actually showing the live video stuff back in the day with MTV, seeing them showing actual live video captures for Worldwide Live. I still to this day can't recall seeing a concert video for Worldwide Live, just the album. Did I miss something along the way?
I think you might be correct. I think you are correct.
But I can remember, but I can remember them showing.
You're right. This may be a personal reflection because at the time, I was a big Scorpion fan. I started seeing him in 82, but me and my buddies were into it. I have a real good friend that's a huge Scorpion fan, and we used to go back and forth. And we saw the tour 2 or 3 times. Saw it in Rochester. Yeah. We went to Syracuse later in the summer. And I remember the Syracuse show, we had the arms over the rails because back then you could go general admission. So maybe I have it burned into my head that I saw it several times. And that sort of...
Hold on. Fact check. We're all wrong here. A VHS was released at the same time with the footage of the Scorpions World Tour. So we're all wrong.
Okay. Well, it was
so that must be where they captured all of those videos that they showed. But you guys got to remember, I know that Verno has, gone on record that he wasn't as big, but Walt, you and I, it's a little closer to our age bracket with the MTV thing. All of those MTV in concerts, the Scorpions was one of them. They'd have those half-hour shows where they'd lump in, 4, 5, 6 songs. They did it with Dio. They did it with a lot of the bands. One of the other bands we're actually going to talk about, they did it with as well. But that's what I remember the most.
Who's the other band we were going to talk about? You said
we're going to talk about Open Fire by Y&T.
Well, yeah, we got a couple. We got Open Fire. We got Down for the Count.
Another classic live album.
All right. Well, you got 90 seconds. So what do you got?
Dave Meniketti on fire with his Les Paul ripping through that Marshall stack. Granted, they all were taking on the look at the time in their costumes and everything, but back then especially, there was no other band like Y&T. Y&T could keep up with anybody in a live setting. And the Open Fire, the live video, I can remember when they showed that on MTV concerts, it was mind blowing, and seeing Meniketti ripping it in those solos, man, it was just it burned right into my brain. I love it. That's a great album.
Walt, you and Y&T, you go back, don't you?
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. There's nothing but good things on this album, and to this day, they're still a killer band. So enough said. I think we all agree that's an A+ effort.
All right, well, we got about 20 minutes left, so why don't we go underground and talk about some of the heavier bands. 85 Anthrax came around with the EP Armed and Dangerous. That was sort of like a crossover from the end of the Neil Turbin era. Redid some of those songs. Joey Belladonna joined the band. Danny Lilker was out. Frankie Bello was in. And then Spread into Disease. Both these albums recorded down in Ithaca, New York, as well as the SOD Stormtroopers of Death, which came out in 85 too, which, if you're not familiar with that,
love it.
Crossover album with Scott Ian, Charlie Benante, Danny Lilker, the bass player that was on the first Anthrax, and Billy Milano. This is great shit. I love this period. It's Armed and Dangerous. Anthrax is one of those bands, even to this day, this last little 4 or 5 albums they put coming out, Four Kings and Come For You, or Come For You All, but the it slips my mind, but the last couple albums they've been doing have been really, really good. Their whole career. Walt, what's your take on Anthrax? You with them? You against them?
Oh, I'm big with Anthrax. Again, and just talking about the 85 influence here. let's go in reverse. I want to talk about the SOD release first because,
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about politically incorrect in this day and age. But, man, I wore the shit out of this cassette. My friends and I did, 15-year-old kids giggling at every little thing, Speak English or Die, an anti-procrastination song that was all of 10 seconds and, just everything, the Ballad of Jimi Hendrix and all the dead stars at the end. Oh, my God, wore it out. They came out with other albums. They were all just as funny. I saw them one time at a little bar in Hoboken in the late 80s when they kind of got back together. And, just March of the SOD was awesome. But the Underground album, and when you go to the Anthrax guys, I've been a big follower of them, their whole career, and I've seen it all. And again, they were a New York band. They had that edge, and they were just street kids, from Lemoore and that kind of thing, the Bronx. Just good stuff. I mean, this album's just got, killer songs. I mean, Madhouse and Armed and Dangerous and Medusa and, across the board, just a killer album. I love them. And they were on the rise at this point in time, man. They came out of that Old Bridge Metal Militia period, Yep. So this was kind of the beginning of them, and they cut their teeth. They would only get better, or at least they would only get better for a couple of years, and then they kind of switched their sound a little bit, but it was never bad, but it just got a little different. So thumbs up on both of those guys.
Yeah. Ian, you're all good.
I agree. I mean, everything that he said was right on the mark. I mentioned when we were doing pre-show stuff with Verno, I went back and listened to some stuff, and AIR, I can remember the first time hearing it, kicking off that tape. I was like, oh my God. I mean, they always brought that hardcore attitude with their songs, and they were able to keep that fast intensity. It was always just awesome. And Charlie Benante is just an animal anyway. So
I'm going to go deep into the underground. Hallows Eve, Tales of Terror, killer band from the Georgia area. Jimmy Stewart, or Tommy Stewart, lead guy over there. They're good shit. Nasty Savage, Florida. Some call it swamp metal. Nasty Ronnie. That was good stuff. And Sabotage from Florida. We're going to touch on Sabotage, but there's another band that comes from this era, Trouble in the Skull from Chicago. This is all stuff that they definitely weren't glam. They definitely weren't some of the Anthraxes and some of the other big four bands, but these bands were, they just killed. And Overkill from New York, Feel the Fire, the EP. Guys, you two have a love affair with Sabotage. Lance, you go first, or Walt, you go first. What you and Sabotage, what do you know about them?
I mean, I've covered them on our previous episodes, and this was the growth in the band right here. I mean, I know both Ian and I love this album. I think side one is it's just killer. I mean, the title track, it still puts chills up and down my spine now when I hear it. From that opening riff, it's just awesome lyrics to it. It's just such a strong, inspirational song. It's just good. This is a complete album. I mean, yeah, you had Sirens and Dungeons Are Calling that were kind of split up with the releases, and they were recorded the same day and all that stuff. But this was the band at let's say they were really growing here. And when Hall of the Mountain King would come out in 2 years, you even saw that a step further. I love this album. I especially love side one. Nothing else to say about it.
Yeah, I mentioned to John when we were talking before, they're one of those bands, say like maybe an Armored Saint, say like, a handful of other bands that came out at the time, that if you didn't know that they were from the States, you would think that they were from the UK or Europe, because they had such a unique metal sound. They always had that dark minor symphonic orchestrated, type thing going on.
Yeah.
It took Paul O'Neill later on to help flush it out a little bit more, but the Oliva brothers, with the material that they were writing, and I agree with you, Lance, that the whole first side, this is one of those albums, you put it on, you play it, it's done. You start it over, you do it again.
Yeah.
It's just one of those albums. You play it.
They were the forefathers of power metal, as we talked about a couple episodes. They may have been the band that coined that term, you know?
Yeah. Or at least they were in that initial handful of, of those bands that were doing it. Absolutely.
Let's just finish up the underground, if you will. Exodus, Bonded by Blood, probably the 4.2 of the big four. From the Bonded by Blood, it's just their best. It's killer thrash right from the start. Megadeth, Killing Is My Business. Outside of the production, be a little sketchy. I had a chance to see the tour. They opened for King Diamond, and I love that one. And Raven, Stay Hard. That was their attempt once they got signed by Atlantic, and they took a little bit of a detour off the. I don't think they were ready for prime time exactly on that one. And Slayer,
overkill.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, okay. Slayer, Hell Awaits. I've been a big fan of Slayer. They had first part of their career all the way up till Seasons of the Abyss, I think is great stuff. And that covers the underground. So staying on the streets of New York, Twisted Sister, who is a pulse on, what was 85? Come Out and Play?
Come Out and Play.
Yeah. They should have stayed. They should have stayed in, would they have a Leader of the Pack? Was that the album with the
and too cruel to be school, or
too cool for school.
You talk about a band that had it all in their hands and tried to change the formula and go commercial, and it just backfired in their face.
And they used
a mistake.
Used all it up on Stay Hungry.
Well, that was the thing. And Stay Hungry was, it was there. Like I mentioned before, I was never a huge fan, but there were, that was one of those things that kind of kept them at least slightly still connected to their earlier material. By the time they got to this point, you can hear a distinct change in their sound.
Yeah.
The way that they were writing, the way that they're, it was just another one that tried to jump on a trend, and it just went badly, unfortunately.
Let's see. Wasp, The Last Command.
It's a good album.
What's that?
It's a good album.
Yeah, I like Wasp. They're I'm looking forward to the 40th anniversary tour this year. They have a lot of material. They're worth checking out again. I remember The Last Command. What did they have on there? Blind in Texas and
Blind in Texas. I remember when that song, the video came out, and it was so awesome.
That's
it was
good
such
shit,
a
man.
Killer song, man.
Chris Holmes, Steve Riley, Blackie Lawless, and
Wild
Randy
Child's another one.
Yeah, Randy Piper, or did he take over for the drummer? But there was 85, and then Dio, Sacred Heart. Was that the first album, that Sacred Heart, with the 15-year-old guitarist?
With Craig Goldie? No, that was the next one. This is the last one with Viv.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. He got replaced mid-tour.
Yeah.
By Craig Goldie.
Yep.
Yeah, Dio, we've gone on record through this whole series. We all have an affinity.
I'm a big Dio fan, as you guys know. I like this album, but I don't love it. I think there's two great songs: King of Rock and Roll Children, killer. Sacred Heart is good. Hungry for Heaven, I can't stand. Way too poppy. The rest of it,
No,
I know this was the big growth in the tour, where he had the big props and the breeding dragon and the Sphinx and whatever else he had.
Yep.
I didn't see this tour, but I do know this was this was the big period for Dio in 85.
Fuck, I did see that tour. I forgot about that dragon.
Yeah.
Well, he had it again later on. He used it with Craig Goldie on the Dream Evil.
Maybe that was it. I remember a dragon. Let's see. Saxon, Innocence Is No Excuse. Not a bad album.
It was a little, that was just like with the Raven thing for me. They were starting to try to follow trends. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to clear the stage right now, and I'm going to give it over to Metal Wall, because we're going to go Rush, Power Windows. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to set the clock. You get 3 minutes, and I'm going to give you all my time, because, I love Rush. And in 85, I love all Rush. So
I don't think I ever said that I didn't love Rush.
no,
Okay.
not at all. Not at all. But Power Windows. Your take. What do you think?
So yeah, so this is I say number 3 in the series of 4 80s, symphonic keyboard era albums, right? This is the best, hands down. Signals is second. Like it or not, this album itself for me stands up in probably the top 3 of the whole Rush catalog. I absolutely love this album. I mean, there's a couple clunker songs on here, but for the most part, Big Money, Manhattan Project, Marathon, Territories, Middletown Dreams, Mystic Rhythms, love every one of them. I mean, they added some of that orchestration to it, but there was just something different about this album. And the Manhattan Project talking about, the atom bomb. I mean, just the lyrical content and Neil's perspective in Marathon about, that life is not a race to the finish line. It's about the sprint and the pathway to get there. And you need to make changes on course. The compass, Territories. You had some wicked guitar in there. I mean, they even make a little joke about the world needs better beer. I just love this album, and it just fits from that period. But this was the best of the best in that time frame. And what do you think, Vern? You liked Rush then?
Yeah, let's hear a little Getty. I absolutely love Rush. And like when you go live and you hear this.
They carted out these songs on the Clockwork Angels tour. I went to opening night up in Manchester, New Hampshire in 2012, I think it was. And their set in set 1 was predominantly from the 80s albums. And I think they drew at least 3 or 4 off of this in set 1. And then they would sprinkle in different songs because they had 3 different set lists. And I do remember Geddy and Alex saying they had this resurgence and appreciation for this period, especially this album. And they wanted to draw it back and play a lot of it on that tour and then in a way retire it. So when they came back to the R40 tour, you didn't really hear anything from this album. But it lasted for them. Maybe they didn't appreciate it at the time, or maybe it was a little embarrassing, but they grew on them.
Actually, to tell you the truth, I didn't appreciate it back in 85 when Power Windows came out. And, I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, what kind of album cover is this? But it took those later tours for me to go and see these songs performed live to realize how great it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think the one thing that we probably all can agree on, I mean, aside from the fact that they're very electronic drum and keyboard centric, when you hear them in the live context, when they had done some of these performances, it's just like with some of these classic live albums, you would hear, let's say, Kiss. Okay, that first album, production wise was kind of but you hear it when those songs are played on a live, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I missed that. And that's how some of these songs are too.
I got 10 seconds left on Rush. We all love it. That's why they call it Mount Rushmore, right?
Yep.
All right, we got 5 minutes left. We're going to end with a little wrap up on the Live Aid festival, and there were some heavy metal connections there. Guys, you got any loose ends you want to get out there? Walt, you want to talk about Kicks, or Ian, I want to mention Yngwie marching out. I know that was a staple back in the day.
I'll throw it real quick. I mean, Marching Out, second release, full length release from Yngwie. Jeff Scott Soto singing his ass off. It's just a great album for anybody that is a guitar centric person like me, being a guitar player. I loved it. I wore out the copy that I had back in the day playing it. It was one of those ones that was in rotation outside of my Van Halen stuff.
Yeah.
Which I never stopped listening to the classic Van Halen.
Never. Yeah, kudos. As we tape this, yesterday was Eddie Van Halen's birthday, so tip of the hat to EVH. Walt, And any loose ends, any bands you want to talk about, or you got
Real quick, before we get to Live Aid, real quick, is just one personal one. I loved White Lions Fight to Survive, another album that was very underappreciated. And I really never really got to visit this album until they hit it a little bigger in '87. And I went back and bought this cassette. And it's just a killer album. I think Ian would agree. It's got all those elements of cool songwriting, good, guitar playing, great singing. Just a good album. I had to give it a shout out. But yeah, let's get on to Live Aid. So listen, what else is there to say at Live Aid? I mean, you had a global event taking place in London and Philadelphia, but forgetting all the bands, look at the reunions. The Who, and then Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath with Ozzy, and then you had Judas Priest playing. I mean, what else is there to say? I can't remember exactly, but I think Sabbath went on at something like 5 to 11 in the morning.
Yeah. And
Priest went on at 3 in the afternoon. It was like, oh my God, but Ozzy with the weird spiky hair back then.
Yep.
And, of course the imagery was Ozzy's going to come back in, and being the Black Sabbath historian I am, I think I know here that they were at that kind of, flux state where Gillan went back to Deep Purple in '84. Tony didn't know what he was doing. He wanted to put out a solo album, which would have become 7-star. The label forced it against him, and you think he was really thinking there would have been an Ozzy reunion. But that was my take on that. I mean, just knowing Priest was there. You guys are a little bit more on the Zeppelin piece. You could probably comment on that, but it was part of '85, and that's simple as that.
That Zeppelin, Phil Collins filled in on drums, and the fun thing mentioned before, Phil actually played at both locations that day. He played in London. He took the Concorde over and played with Zeppelin, and the Zeppelin performance really. Jimmy Page was the first one to say that it was terrible. It was, out of tune and this and that. And we don't know if, substances were involved, but the fact that Robert Plant, the excitement was there when they came out and, Pagey comes out with that guitar and JPJ walks out and, Robert Plant. Now remember, this was '85. And in '80, they called it a day, and Plant was had success with his solo stuff, Pictures at 11, and some of those solo albums. So, but just the fact that bands like Zeppelin and not so much Zeppelin, but like Judas Priest and Sabbath, they were included in this global event when you had Dire Straits, Madonna, the Pretenders, a young U2, all these bands that were went on to be Hall of Fame bands, but they were the hugest bands of the time. And it's just, back then metal was getting their due. They had respect, and
it was an awesome event. And let's not forget the performance of Queen. We haven't talked about them a ton in latest episodes, but that was a period of time. And even the movie they did a few years ago, I mean, that was recaptured. That was a beautiful 4 or 5 song set. And definitely worth a call out on this show for any hard rock fans.
Ian, you got a take on Live Aid?
I think I had mentioned to you sidebar before. I was not a big fan of the whole thing at all. I thought it back then especially was a big cash grab and a big advertisement for all of the big record mogul people. Because if you can have Led Zeppelin come back together and you can get the Who to come back together, why did Keith Richards and Ron Wood play a separate set from Mick Jagger, who came out and did a whole other set? You couldn't have the original Rolling Stones come back in? No, because they didn't want to do it. I really didn't like the fact that they felt that they had to pull in some of these heavier rock bands, but it wasn't what I was into at the time. I mean, I was kind of beyond Sabbath, and Priest was kind of in that weird flux period. Wasn't going crazy. And looking back at the history of it, they raised $127 million, but even to this day, there are still disputes over how much money actually got sent to Ethiopia and how much was stolen by the government of Ethiopia that never got out to fund people that needed the money out in Africa. It was really just it's a whole big cluster, I mean, but when you look at it, it's almost the setup for every big event or awards thing that's gone on since then, with popular artists. They pull them together, when they had, well, you guys got to remember this, when the Twin Towers came down and they had the whole big gathering of people there. You have people that were coming up to talk, and these are the same people that get on television at all of these stupid award shows, and they say these same stupid comments over and over again because they're media mouthpieces. I didn't have a lot of love for it. The thought was there, the intent was there, but I didn't, other than that, yeah, it was a big mark in history. That's.
But we did have some metal representation.
Yeah,
no, sure,
really
of course.
And then to tell you the truth, I respect your opinion. You have a take, but in '85, that was the farthest thing from my mind. I was just looking to get laid and score another bag. So I was glad to see Sabbath and Zeph got back together. But hey, we're here to discuss and share our opinions. So I got about 90 seconds left. Next episode we're doing is 1986, the golden year of metal. A lot going on, so we look forward to that. Guys, anything to say before we get out of here?
Just glad that we were able to get together in this new meeting.
This was awesome. This was good, impromptu, and loved the last hour.
Okay,
been great.
Well, I want to thank Ian O'Rourke and Metal Walt for coming out and playing tonight. Just want to remind you about our live radio show behind me. You could see Monday nights on Metal Devastation Radio, 3 hours of metal. We have a chat room. We have tunes. I host it. A lot of good shit going on. Visit our website, metalmayhemroc.com, for past shows. Rate, subscribe, review, all that happy horse shit. All right, we're out of here. Thank you for listening. And always remember, what do we do, Ian?
Keep it heavy.
See you guys. Take care.